We are in the British Columbia heat wave right now. Hello everybody. So, please disregard my sweaty appearance. It is currently like 38 degrees outside and I don't have AC obviously. If I look dewy and glowy, it's sweat. Today I wanted to do the mid-year book freakout tag because I love this tag. I've been seeing so many people doing it and it's one of my favorites to watch every year. I'm not really big into tags, but I love this one. I think it was created by Chami. I'm gonna link the original video if I can find it. I have a little sticky note with all the questions on it, so I'm gonna read off of this. But the first one is the best book you've read so far this year. Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Amazing. It's a fantasy inspired by like ancient China and Japan in the Second Sino-Japanese War. We follow a main character named Rin who gets to go to this, she lives in like a like poor southern province, but she just does really well on a test and gets to go to this very esteemed military school, and a few years into her training there, a war breaks out and she ends up, you know, fighting wars, and she ends up unlocking this like mythical power that she has where she can like harness the power of gods. Like, it's really good. It's very dark and very like gritty. Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. Why am I holding them over here? One of my new favorites, like so good. Such a Fun Age is about a 26-year-old black woman living in Boston or New York. I'm not sure. And she is nannying for this like rich white family when she has the kid, she has the toddler at the grocery store one evening, and she gets accosted by this white woman and a security guard who thinks that she's like kidnapped this child. Like, it's very interesting because the woman that she nannies for is basically like obsessed with her. It has a lot of themes of like being like being like a young 20-something in the States growing up. She's also like aging out of her parents' health insurance and dealing with that, and dealing with not really knowing what she's really wanting to do with her life, and just being fine, kind of just nannying while she watched all of her friends who are like, you know, climbing the ladders at these other jobs. And it talks a lot about that. Like I said, it talks a lot about like performative allyship and like racism, and it's just really fascinating, and it was written so well, and it was like so juicy as well. There was like so much drama. It was so good. I loved it, and I need more from Kylie Reid. Like, I need more. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Selling Vampires was like a surprising favorite for me this year. I have mentioned in other videos, like, I acknowledge that, like, although I love this book and like I can still see that there's some like there's some issues with it. Definitely needs trigger warnings. Although I love this book because it is a very fun suburban moms who have a true crime book club, and they start finding weird things going on with their new neighbor, this mysterious guy, and essentially they have to like fucking be monster hunters and vampire slayers, and it's super awesome, and they're badass. I just wish like there was a few things that he could have tweaked, but like I love this book so much. Another one that's an absolute new favorite is Finley Donovan is Killing It by Ellie Cosimano, which is about a woman who is like getting a divorce, and her husband is fighting for custody of her children, and she's going through a lot of drama, and she is a like thriller mystery writer, but the writing well is kind of dry when she's dealing with all of these real life things. So she's, you know, struggling for money, and she meets with her agent or her editor for lunch, and they're talking about the book she's writing and like talking about, you know, murder, because it's a murder mystery type book. And this woman like sitting in the booth next to them, when her editor gets up and leaves, she like comes over and she gives Finley Donovan, she leaves her this note, which is basically like, hey, I heard you talking. I need you to murder my ex-husband or my husband or whatever. I'll pay you this much. And Finley's like, oh my god, she thought that I am a murderer, like I'm a hitman, but it's just the book I'm writing. Anyway, long story short, Finley maybe ends up murdering people for money throughout this book, or things go awry, things happen. But Finley and her kid's babysitter, Vero, who moves in and becomes like the nanny, like they're like such a dynamic duo. I love this book so much. I need a physical copy. I loved it so much. Like, I'm so glad this is going to be a series. The sequel recently got a cover. I'm so stoked. Like, it's basically like a cozy mystery. It's just it's fun the whole time. I love it so much. The last one I'm going to talk about, I actually just finished the other day. And it's One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. It's about a girl named August who's 23, moves to New York City to go to university. She's on like her 4th major because she can't figure out what she wants to do. She moves into this apartment with these 3 other very like eccentric, fun characters. And she meets like a beautiful woman on the subway who like she instantly falls in love with, named Jane. And then eventually she figures out that Jane has been stuck on the subway since the 70s, and so unravels this plot of her and her friends trying to figure out how to get Jane like unstuck from like being trapped in the subway. And it's so beautiful. The writing is so funny. Like all of the characters are so funny. The main character is super in like, she's like a modern day Sherlock, and she's very into true crime because there's another plot line of her uncle going missing like decades before and her mother being obsessed with finding him for her whole life. There's that plot line. There's tons of incredible like queer representation, and there's drag shows, and it's just so fun. The next question is the best sequel that I read this year. I haven't read a ton, but I have a couple that I loved. The first one is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. So this is a sequel to The Poppy War. I already explained what this is about. This was a great sequel, like 5 million stars. Like her writing is just on another level, and the fact that this is her debut series, I'm just blown away. So I love that. Loved it. And then I also really loved The Mask Falling by Samantha Shannon. I reread the first 2 books in the series and then read for the first time the other 2 this year. And this is the most recent one, which came out in January. So much hype around it because it's been like a 4-year wait since the 3rd book came out. It was so good. This is my favorite book in the series. It's set in kind of this futuristic London, set in like 2059. In a future where there are clairvoyants, but it's illegal to be clairvoyant. And so there's these kind of behind the scenes gangs that run the city, you know, all these clairvoyants, but like most people, you know, they're hidden to most people. And so we follow a main character named Paige Mahoney who gets in some trouble and ends up kind of captured and enslaved in this like prison that no one knows about, where all of these missing clairvoyants go. And then there's these like ancient immortal beings named the Rephaim who are using them to battle these like alien monsters that come from other dimensions, and also feeding on their auras. So it's very involved though. Like 4 books into the series, there's so much going on. We've traveled all over Europe with this series. Like it's really fun. I love the characters. It's good. The hype is real. New releases that I have yet to read. Guys, I just bought like a dozen new releases in the last few weeks, and I've only read a couple of them so far. There's so many. I'm looking at them because they're over there. There are so many. I have Mr. Impossible by Maggie Stiefvater, which is the sequel to Call Down the Hawk, which is a spin-off series for the Raven Cycle, one of my favorite YA series. I'm anticipating reading this, and I'm also nervous because I didn't love Call Down the Hawk. Like, I don't think much can stand up to the Raven Cycle in this world that Maggie's trying to write. But I've heard good things about this book. I've heard a lot of people say they like this one more than Call Down the Hawk, so I'm very excited. I'm going to be reading this one in July. Then I also have The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He. This is an anticipated release. It's kind of a sci-fi set in the future where there are like these pods of like cities or communities that are the last like unpolluted places on Earth for the elite to live, and we follow 2 sisters, one of them living in one of these cities, and the other one kind of wakes up on an abandoned island by herself with no memories other than of her sister and wanting to find her sister. This is another one I'm trying to get to in July. And I'm very excited. I think that was a pretty hyped book for a lot of people this year, I think, and me included. Then I also just picked up Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Iyamide, which is so hyped. I didn't really have this on my radar until it came out, and then everyone's talking about it, and I'm like, I have to buy it. I have to know. This is another one I want to get to in July because I have a hold on the audiobook right now. It's following 2 characters at this Nevis private academy. We're following Devin and Chiamaka, and they become part of the school's like elite group of senior prefects, and then someone named Aces starts texting them like threatening to reveal their secrets, and they'll have to like work together to figure out what's going on. I've just heard rave things about this, like as a young adult kind of thriller. It's like amazing is what I've heard, and it also has both a male-male romance and a female-female romance, and I'm so excited for it. So it's also a stunning cover. Besides Mr. Impossible, all of the covers are pretty nice. I have The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. This is a fantasy based on Hungarian history and Jewish mythology. It sounds kind of Red Riding Hood-esque. I've heard it compared to that a lot. It's about a girl. Oh, and there's a pronunciation guide in the back of this book. Thank gosh. I've looked at it so many times already. Evike, I believe, is the main character's name. She's like the only girl in her village without power. So she is sent away to become the king's blood sacrifice because she's powerless, and she gets blamed for all of the village's troubles. And but during her travel to become the blood sacrifice, some monsters attack and they kill everyone except her and this one-eyed captain named Baranya, who turns out to be a disgraced prince. He wants to make sure that his evil cousin or brother doesn't get on the throne. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year, so another one I'm gonna get to in July, but I've been hearing nothing but good things, like 5-star reviews since it's come out, so I'm so excited and so hopeful, and I think it's another debut, so I'm very excited for that. Then I also have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this one is following Mick Riva's children, and Mick Riva was one of Evelyn Hugo's husbands in the book, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I've read all of her books now except this one. I'm very excited for this. I think it's set in Malibu in the 80s and just follows, you know, these very wealthy children of a famous guy. I don't remember if he was an actor. But I think it'll be like a perfect summer read, so I'm really excited to hopefully get to this one this summer as well. I could go on, you guys. I could go on, but I won't. And the next question is books that you're anticipating that have not been released yet. So for me, we are 2 days out from the release of Gear Breakers by Zoe Hana Makuta, which is one of my most anticipated debuts. It is, my pre-order's in the mail right now. It's on the way to me and I'm hoping I get it this week. It is a sci-fi dystopia, like sci-fi type book following 2 main characters, 2 girls who come from like rival sides of this kind of mecha war, but they end up realizing they have a common goal and they work together and they like take down these giant like transformer types, which they call wind-ups, and it just sounds so good. I think May, June, July, and August, those 4 months together have like 70% of my anticipated releases for the year. I know the new Riley Sager also comes out in a couple of days. I'm not super anticipating it, but I will try to get to it in July. I still have to read Home Before Dark. And then there's going to be a new Samantha Downing coming out in July. And I love Samantha Downing. There's also going to be a new Karen Slaughter, which I'm very excited for. Like, there's so many fantasy books that have come out or are coming out. She Who Became the Sun sounds amazing. Like, there's so many fantasy series to start. I'm overwhelmed. The new Stephen Graham Jones comes out, I think, at the end of August. My Heart is a Chainsaw. I already pre-ordered that one. I'm very excited for. Jade Fire Gold by June Ciel Tan is a new fantasy coming out. I'm anticipating the new Mona Awad, All's Well, even though I haven't read Bunny yet. I'm planning to read Bunny next week, but I just think it sounds really good, and I'm hoping that I'm going to love Bunny. The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix comes out in a couple of weeks. There's a new Leah Johnson, Rise to the Sun, which never thought I'd be like anticipating YA contemporary besides like Angie Thomas, but I am. Honestly, Angie Thomas, Leah Johnson, and Tiffany D. Jackson are doing young adult contemporary like no one else. Honestly, there have been so many releases that I was anticipating that I haven't even got around to buying yet because I'm trying to like limit my book buying and like read them as I buy them. So I have like these new like a dozen books that I just bought. I'm gonna stop there because that's tons that I'm listing off, but there's so many. The next question is, your biggest disappointment so far this year is Hench by Natalie Zena Walshots. I read this one because it was a Canada Read shortlist, but I also it was on my radar and I wanted to read it. I was already hyped for it before it became a Canada Read selection. And this is about a woman who, it's set in like Toronto, I think, and it's about a woman who henches for supervillains. Like, she basically works for them. And I thought the premise sounded so good. I was like, this is gonna be like Marvel meets Vicious meets like an Office Job. Like, I thought it sounded so good, but in the execution, it kind of fell flat for me. The book was just very slow, and it was super, like, there wasn't a ton of action, and it was very, like, meandering, I guess. That's a word that I love to use, I guess, to describe books quite often. But it just wasn't, like, the kind of exciting supervillain story I was expecting. It was more, you know, this woman works in, like, the IT for these supervillains, and then she gets injured by a superhero and is kind of trying to like get revenge on him. And it's just, it seems so exciting, but I think I only ended up giving it maybe 3 stars, or 2.5, I don't remember, but it just, I had such high hopes. It was still a good read, like it was still good, but it wasn't like fantastic like I was hoping for. I don't really have many books that I thought were going to be so good and were like a 1 star. I haven't given anything a 1 star this year. The other one is The Witch King by H.E. Edgman. Again, another book that I still gave like 3 stars, 2.5 or 3 stars. But I just had really high hopes for it, and it was more the writing style for me. This is a young adult debut about a boy who's a witch, and he is descended from fairies. So like in this world, the fairies kind of live among the humans because they've been cast out of their fairy realm and it was like taken over. But occasionally a witch is born to the fairies, and the only thing that they think witches are good for is like breeding with the fairies to make like better bloodlines. Like they have this way of genetically kind of pairing people together. And so our main character, Wyatt, is a trans mask character, and he flees his fairy village after something horrific happens. But the fairy prince Emir, who he was betrothed to, finds him 2 years later and like takes him back to carry on with the marriage. And honestly, I expected so much from this book, and it was written in a very, I guess, young, kind of angsty way. Like it was super geared towards like young, angsty, like 15-year-olds, which I understand. Like it's a young adult book. Like I shouldn't expect anything else. I'm not the demographic. Like I'm not the demographic for this book. But I still read a lot of YA and really love it. But like there are many different writing styles within YA, and this one was just written a little more young. And also I felt like it was kind of Stockholm syndrome-y. It was a fun time. It just was not, you know, what I had hyped it up in my mind to be. Biggest surprise. Okay, the biggest surprise for me this year, I have a few. The first one is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, because this is about, I can't remember the main character's name, but she's like a senior in high school, and the funding for her, like the financial aid for her to go to university gets like cut off, or something happens and she doesn't have that anymore. So she ends up having to run for prom queen, because whoever wins prom queen gets a scholarship. So that's not her thing at all, but she runs for prom queen. She meets this new girl in town who's also running for prom queen. You know, unlikely friendships, or maybe likely friendships. It's just a super heartwarming, lovely novel. It's sapphic. There's some like female romance a little bit sprinkled in. It's a really lovely young adult contemporary, and I really wasn't expecting to love, like I said, young adult contemporary, not my thing, but I absolutely loved it. Another one that was a surprise for me was The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi, because I was given this for Christmas and I really just didn't expect anything from it. Like I didn't really know much about it, and I absolutely loved it. This follows a woman named Lakshmi who flees her abusive marriage in the 1950s or 70s? The 1950s, and she moves to Jaipur, and she becomes a henna artist, and she also helps like women with like reproductive health. And one day, many years after she already left like her abusive marriage, her ex-husband shows up on her doorstep with a girl claiming to be her little sister, saying that their parents had died and she's an orphan and Lakshmi needs to take care of her. So Lakshmi ends up parenting this little girl who's like 12 or something at the beginning of the novel, who she never even knew about because her parents had her after Lakshmi had already left, and they never mentioned her to Lakshmi in any of their letters. It deals with sister relationships and like those familial kind of relationships. It deals with like women's reproductive issues in India in the 1960s or 70s. It follows Lakshmi trying to like working so hard trying to save money so she can like she's building this like dream house for herself. It was really so enjoyable. It was so like brilliantly written. I was so surprised by this book because I absolutely love it, and I'm really anticipating reading the sequel, which just came out at some point when it fits on my TBR. It was really good, and I would recommend it to anyone. Next question is your favorite new author. I've got a couple answers for this again. So I'm assuming this means obviously authors that you've just read for the first time this year. So R.F. Kuang, definitely. Desmond Ward, which I've only read this book by her, which is a memoir where she's kind of talking about and recounting the lives of these men, these 5 different men that she grew up with and was close to in her life, and all of them died in very tragic and horrific ways. And it was a super like raw, emotional, very moving, written so well. I just want to read everything she's written now. The next question is new favorite character. Okay. Every single character from this book. Not to be annoying, but like it's such a loving, eccentric, like accepting, like beautiful group of characters. They're so funny. They're so fun to read about. Like I could read about these characters again and again. I mean, like Casey McQuiston. Maybe you should like do another book, but follow one of the other characters from this book. Made me cry is the next question. A book that made me cry. I'm gonna say Us Against You, which is the sequel to Beartown. I just thought of this book because I've been thinking about these questions for a few days and I was like racking my brain. But there's a part in this book where it's alluding to like a character death. Like one of the other characters is really worried and she's running around looking for this person and imagining they've died. And I was freaking the fuck out. Like I was losing it and that character didn't die and I was like, oh my god. This book though, like Frederick Bachman's writing really pulls on your heartstrings. I want to read a few more books by him before I decide that he's like a favorite author, but he's definitely one in the running as well because Beartown and Us Against You really blew me away this year and I was very surprised. Honestly, those would be biggest surprise as well. Honestly, every book is like for every question, oh my gosh. I don't cry a ton at books. I am a crier when it comes to like movies and TV shows. I mean, I'm a Pisces, I'm very emotional, but books, not as much. But I also, there's a character death around the end of this book, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and I bawled my eyes out because I was very attached to all these characters. Made me happy. What books made me happy? One Last Stop, definitely. The whole time I was reading it, well, I was listening to the audiobook, but I was just like this the whole time. Like, I loved it so much. Another one was You Should See Me in a Crown. I love that book. And then also, Finley Donovan is killing it because I love that book so much. Like, it is one of my new favorites ever. I'm just obsessed. I'm obsessed. Next question is the most beautiful book I've bought this year. And I think this is a lot of people's answer, but The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He. This cover, beautiful. And I know that the artist, I follow them on Instagram, but I can't pronounce their name. I'm gonna leave the link to the artist's Instagram. I follow them on Instagram. All their art is amazing. I love this. Like, it's beautiful. The last question is other books that I need to read before the end of the year. So obviously we already talked about all those new releases that I want to read and also all the ones that haven't released yet that I want to read. But there's some other ones, some like backlist that I really want to read. I really want to read The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, which I'm hoping to get to this summer. I'm not ready, but also I am, but I'm not. Another one I want to read, because I bought this book full price, brand new when it came out a couple months ago, and I still haven't read it, is Who is Maud Dixon by Alexandra Andrews. This is a thriller mystery. It's about a woman who becomes the assistant to this like very mysterious but very famous writer. This anonymous writer ends up passing away or getting murdered or dying, and then her assistant assumes her role because she's a mysterious writer and no one really knew her. I think maybe the assistant assumes the role and like takes over and like steals this writer's manuscript. I'm not sure, but I'm very stoked to read this and I really need to get to it because I bought it a few months ago. Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. This book is a tome, but I've been wanting to read this one, but I want to reread some of the other Grisha books first because I don't remember much from King of Scars and I need a refresher, and I've been wanting to reread Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom for a long time as well. But I don't know when I'm going to feel emotionally ready for that, and also like when am I going to make time in my TBR for that. I also really want to read The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, about two sisters who I think are biracial. Either way, one of them or both of them are white passing, and so one of them chooses to live as a black woman, one of them chooses to live as a white woman, and how that molds both not only their lives, but also the lives of their children and so on. I just watched Joel Rochester's video, I'll link it, where he read the 2021 Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist, and he thinks that this book should win. I also really want to get to Jade City by Fonda Lee. I've never heard a bad thing about this series. I've never heard a bad thing. And it just sounds so good. It takes place on this Asian-inspired island of Kikon. There are these different clans of like families fighting for power, and I believe they can use jade for magical purposes, or like they have some magical powers. I don't know. I've heard nothing but good things though, and I'm so excited. I really want to read this. Like, I'm thinking about putting it on my July TBR, even though I have a million books on there already. This one just came out in paperback though, and it's Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Like a horror about a girl who has like gets a mysterious letter from her cousin and has to go and like rescue her from this gothic mansion. That's gonna be it from me for this video. I'm actually just like surrounded by books right now, which is a great place to be, especially I mean when it's 30 degrees in my house almost. Let me know in the comments if you did this tag. Leave me just like a book stack emoji if you got all the way to the end of this video, honestly, because that's what I'm surrounded by right now. Let me know what you're most anticipating to read, either a book that already came out or a book that hasn't come out yet, because I have so many I would love to discuss. So yeah, that's gonna be it. Thank you guys so much for watching this chaotic video and getting through this with me, because it was chaotic, but I had a great time, and I will see you soon with another video. Happy reading. Bye bye.